here today.
No, I'm glad that your office made me go through the process.
The process, yeah.
Now I know the process. and it was a lot of back and forth, but we finally nailed the speakers we needed. I didn't know who I needed.
We never know at the beginning. Yeah? It's as we go forward. This is how we realize. Okay, we need this person. This person.
Right. Perfect. So it's 9 o'clock. I get to give you a welcome, and I'm just gonna confirm who's showing the slides. I can do the slides if.
Hi, Claudia. I am doing the slides today.
Perfect. So let me do a quick intro. And Amanda and Eric, Lauren will take care of the slides for you. You just have to let her know when you want to switch.
Perfect.
So let me just quickly share. I have the name of your presentation on my slides. Perfect. So welcome back, everyone. We are having our first session of the day after the keynote. Eric Diotte and Amanda Popowicz-Soni are from the Office of the Pay Equity Commissioner, Canadian Human Rights Commission. Their job is to coordinate the Canada Pay Equity Act. So they're here to give us an information session on what the Canada Pay Equity Act is and how it can be maybe borrowed for our private industry, because I think the act is only for the government offices. So please help me welcome Eric and Amanda.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Diotte. I'm the director and the head of compliance of the Office of the Pay Equity Commissioner.
And my name's Amanda Popowicz-Soni. I'm a senior policy analyst with the office. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you. So we can go to slide number 2, please. So today we will be giving you a lot of information. We will try to speak slowly, as slow as we can, but we also plan two times, like 2 small breaks with the opportunity for you to ask questions. So hopefully it's going to break the flow a little bit. So today, during our time, we will go through who we are, our office. We will also discuss the concept of pay equity. We will also discuss the Pay Equity Act and its regulations. We will dive into employer obligations, employees' right. And finally, we will show you like a quick un petit survol of the resource that we have available on our website. So we can go to slide number 4, please. So we are a very small team, but we're really mighty. Currently, we are 13 people in our office, and we support and report, and we report to and support the Canada's Pay Equity Commissioner, Laurie Sveznicki. Our mandate is to administer and enforce compliance with the Pay Equity Act. Our vision is to be an excellent federal regulator that ensures compliance with the Act and its regulation. And our mission is to be a leader in proactive pay equity by providing reliable information, timely resolution of dispute, and transparent oversight. So we can go to the next slide. So concretely, what it means is we do all that work, like I mentioned, to support the Pay Equity Commissioner and her mandate. That includes administrating and enforcing the Pay Equity Act, assisting workplace parties in complying with the Act, and also to facilitate compliance, notably when there's dispute among workplace parties. Just to give you an example, our office is, we have three main units within our office. We have a unit that focuses on regulatory operations, and that team supports the Pay Equity Commissioner by addressing requests for authorization, matters in dispute, objections, and complaints that we might receive from workplace parties. And they also monitor and provide guidance through our intake function by responding to stakeholder questions. We also have a technical implementation team that focuses on creating tools in order to assist the workplace party to comply with the Act. For example, we have portals that we developed. We have one that's called the Pay Equity Portal, which provides a solution for workplace parties or stakeholders to communicate directly with us if they have any specific question about the Act and the regulation. And we recently launched a annual statement portal in which it provides the tool for employer to submit their annual statement that they have to submit according to the legislation. And they also support and develop all the internal tools and systems that we need in order to ensure that we're able to deliver our mandate. Finally, we have our policy, research, and engagement team, and that team provides guidance and interpretation on the Act and regulation. And the purpose is to support and help workplace parties to better understand their obligation and also to comply with the Act. And our office has been in existence since 2018, and since then we did develop a high number of interpretation that workplace parties are using on a daily basis. We can go to the next slide. So with that, this was a quick introduction about who we are and what we do. And so what I'll do, I will now pass the virtual mic to Amanda, and she will be presenting on some specific key aspect about the Act, regulations, and employer obligation, and also employees' right.
Thank you very much, Eric. So today we're going to start our conversation about what equal pay of work for equal value means. Equal pay equity means equal pay for work of equal value. It requires that jobs mostly done by women and jobs mostly done by men be paid the same if the value of the work done is equal. Pay equity is not the same as equal pay for equal work. This means that women and men doing the same work are paid the same. Slide 8, please. A great story to illustrate what we're talking about is the story of Ruth Walden and the nurses. This is one of the more famous landmark pay equity cases in Canada's history. It dates back about 20 years when our federal pay equity regime was almost entirely reactive and reliant on people filing complaints directly to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. So a little bit about Ruth. She worked as a nurse and a medical adjudicator for the Canada Pension Plan. She would review applications for the CPP benefit. She and her fellow nurse practitioners worked alongside doctors in this job, often working on the same case files, but they were classified and paid very differently. The mostly male doctors were considered healthcare professionals, while the female-dominated group of nurses were classified as administrators. But the work all had the same value, the same importance to the process. So Ruth filed a complaint with the Canadian Human Rights Commission in 2004. And after 8 years of legal wrangling, the federal government agreed in 2012 to settle the class action suit for more than $160 million, with back pay dating back to 1978. It was a huge victory, but for many of the nurses, it was too late. Some had died, some were near the end of their later years. It was a clear sign that the old complaints-based system, it needed revision. And that's why today we're so happy to be here to tell you about the Pay Equity Act and what it means for all of us. Slide 9, please. As noted, pay equity means equal pay for work of equal value. To determine comparable jobs and their value, the factors of skill, effort, responsibility, and conditions under which the work is performed are assessed using a gender-neutral job evaluation method. For example, in the case of Ruth Walden, it was found that the male job class of healthcare professionals was comparable and of equal value to the female job class of administrators. Slide 10, please. There are varying policies, so thank you, varying policies and legislation that exist across our country. So this image here of Canada shows how each province and territory address pay equity. For instance, proactive pay equity legislation, and I will explain what this means a little bit later in the presentation. It's found in 6 provinces. These are Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Of these 6, 2, so Ontario and Quebec, apply to both the public and private sectors. So this is important to know because the Pay Equity Act applies to federal jurisdiction workplaces only. There is a difference between what legislation federal jurisdiction workplaces and provincial jurisdiction workplaces have to follow. And I'll explain more about what federal jurisdiction workplaces mean in just a moment. Slide 11, please. And now we'll briefly walk you through the Pay Equity Act. Slide 12, please. First of all, it's still new in the great scheme of history. It was only passed in 2018, but it officially came into force on August 31st, 2021. Another important thing about the Pay Equity Act is that it is proactive. This means that employers must take steps to address any gender-based discrimination in their pay practices. So no longer having to rely on the complaints function, like in Ruth Walden's era. This proactive approach is different from a complaints-based approach that requires employees to file a complaint when they believe that their right to pay equity has not been upheld. A proactive approach is able to get to the root causes and addresses inequities in how employees are paid so that hopefully one day complaints are not needed at all. Slide 13, please. So this is a bit of an overview of the Pay Equity Act. Here's some key points to keep in mind, and you can remember them using these 4 numbers. So 1.4 million, that's the approximate number of federal employees who are covered by the Act. Then 10, the Act applies to federal jurisdiction employers with an average of 10 or more employees. So that translates to approximately 5,000 federal workplaces across Canada. 3, most employers must create and post their first pay equity plan within 3 years of becoming subject to the Act. And then 5, employers must follow the maintenance process and post an updated pay equity plan at least every 5 years. Slide 14, please. So now we'll get into our conversation about what federal jurisdiction looks like. So as I mentioned, the Pay Equity Act, it applies to federally regulated employers with 10 or more employees. So these employers commonly work within or operate within the following industries, and you'll see them listed here. You'll see transportation that crosses borders, so air, rail, road, and water. The banking industry, construction industry that crosses borders. So here you can think of canals, pipelines, tunnels, bridges, that kind of thing. Then you have the federal public service. You have the grain industry, everything from the handling, the elevators, the mill operators. Similarly, also livestock food manufacturing. You have offshore marine installations or structures, industries that protect fisheries as a natural resource, telecommunications and broadcasting industry and everything that goes with that. You have uranium mining and processing, like nuclear power plants. You have crown corporations, like Canada Post. And last but not least, even our own Canadian Parliament is bound by the Pay Equity Act, as are ministers and the Prime Minister's office. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the Pay Equity Act, it covers approximately 1.4 million federal employees. The definition of employee provided in the Act, it's quite broad, and it includes both unionized and non-unionized employees, full and part-time, permanent, casual, and temporary employees, dependent contractors, employees performing federally regulated activities as part of a separate unit for a provincial employer, employees on leave, including long-term leave. So, for example, here you would see sick leave or maternity leave. And finally, the Act covers both management and non-management positions. If anyone had any questions to start off.
Well, people are adding questions to the Q&A. I have one for you.
Okay.
But please, audience, you get to ask questions on the Q&A tab. So you have it on your right-hand side of your screen. You can add questions on the Q&A. So the question that I had is, what steps did the provincial government in Ontario take or have to take to ensure that the Canada Pay Equity Act applied to both public and private?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So Ontario employees, if the workplace isn't federal, the Canada Pay Equity Act would not apply to them. But there is separate Ontario legislation that applies to provincially regulated workplaces. If you go to the Ontario Pay Equity Office, they have a website online that has an abundance of information about that legislation. I will share, however, that both the Ontario and Quebec models that they're using for their provincially regulated workplaces, those have been in place for quite a while now. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Quebec, it's back from 1980, and Ontario followed shortly after. So those models have been in operation for some time.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. So we do have to do some work on the provincial sides if we want to adopt and expand some of the
yes.
influences of the Act.
Next. But that separation, it's established by the Constitution, right? So right. The provinces have jurisdiction over their workplaces, while as the federal has jurisdiction over their over different types of workplaces as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
Next question this is from Kelsey. Is there an equivalent to the Canada Pay Equity Act that applies to companies outside of federal?
Okay, so again, Kelsey, we're going to share our PowerPoint afterwards, but you'll be able to see on that map all of the different types of legislation and policies that apply in those provinces and territories. And you'll see where that division is. So you'll be able to kind of explore, I guess you can say, which pay equity regime or human rights regime, if you will, applies to the specific area that you're interested in.
Perfect. The next question, Adriana, I think Adriana works for the government. How can we ensure that our employer adheres to the Equity Pay Act?
What a great question. I'm actually going to save that one until later because we're actually going to go through the Pay Equity Act and we're going to talk a little bit about what the employer's obligations are and also what the employee rights are. So, Adriana, if you don't mind, we're going to save your great question until after that section.
Perfect.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks.
That is what we have so far. So you can continue.
Excellent. All right. So slide 17, please. Okay. So Adriana, here's your question, employer obligations. We're going to get to the nitty gritty now. What is required of employers under the Act and what do they need to do to be in compliance? For us, we have found the simplest way to think about this as a timeline. Slide 18, please. So this is a timeline that we've put together on an infographic and it's available on our website. If it's something of interest, you will be able to access it there. So this is a main pay equity timeline for key employer obligations. I'm just going to go over each one with you and provide you kind of a high level overview of each key point. So the first milestone, it started in 2021 when the Act came into force. At this time, employers were advised to start establishing a foundation for pay equity in their workplaces. Examples of the types of actions that describe what establishing a foundation means include, so they were obligated to post a notice that sets out the employer's responsibilities to establish a pay equity plan, inform employees that they may request the employer to put in place a pay equity committee, put in place a pay equity committee, should they be required to do so, and inform non-unionized and unionized employees of their right to representation on the pay equity committee. So a lot of talk here about putting in place a pay equity committee. So that was the next step of establishing a foundation. So this step is mandatory for employers with 100 or more employees, and if some or all employees are unionized. A next key step under milestone 1 is to collect workplace information that would be required for the development of a pay equity plan. Examples of these types of information include job class data and compensation data. So milestone 2, you'll see here, it took us all the way to the end of last year, around 2024. So for most employers who became subject to the Act on August 31st, 2021, they were obligated to post the first final version of their pay equity plan on September 3rd, 2024. So last September was a big day for us at the office. And I'll share with you a little bit more information about how to create a pay equity plan in just a few moments. So milestone 3 and 2, they're very closely tied. Milestone 3 is really where concrete change starts to happen. This is where employers increase employee compensation. So if employees in female job classes are owed an increase in compensation, employers must post a notice informing employees about these increases and the date on which they are payable. So starting last September 4th, 2024, increases in compensation they've had to be paid. However, there are provisions in the Act that allow employers to phase in these increases if they represent 1% or more of the employer's preceding year's payroll costs. That's why you'll see in our timeline under milestone 3, in some cases, the timeline can carry out into 2029. This phase-in period, it's based on the size of the employer. So for employers with 10 to 99 employees, the increases must be phased in within 5 years. For employers with 100 or more employees, increases must be phased in within 3 years. Failure to pay an increase in full as per the phase-in schedule, it results in the accrual of interest. Interest is calculated and compounded daily at a rate of 2% annually, plus the bank rate in effect on the day for which the interest is calculated. So milestone 4, This is one that our office is very busily preparing for. The date for milestone 4 is coming up on June 30th, 2025. This milestone identifies the employer's reporting obligation to submit an annual statement to the office. The annual statement should include information about the employer, information from their pay equity plan, and information from specific notices that they've posted throughout the pay equity process. With the pay equity plan complete, along with successful increases to employee compensation, employers then need to maintain and update their pay equity plan. So that brings us to milestone 5. The Act specifies that a pay equity plan, it must be updated at least every 5 years. Employers will work within this time frame and update their pay equity plan based on whether the workplace information that they have collected indicates any changes. And in a sense, this becomes very much like a regular cycle, which begins by posting a notice. Employers must then put in place a pay equity committee or renew its membership if required to do so. And as a third step in the maintenance process, employers must collect updated workplace information. And the purpose of collecting this workplace information is to track any changes that affect the compensation between predominantly female and male job classes. Slide 19, please. Thank you. Now that you have a bit of information about the timeline of key milestones, let's talk more about the second milestone, creating and posting a pay equity plan. So this image here, it shows you the 7 steps that go into creating and posting a plan. As Eric mentioned, we do have numerous publications on the Canadian Human Rights Commission's website that provide detailed interpretations and guidance on these steps. For example, we have 2 whole series on calculating compensation and comparing compensation, interpretations of key legal terms, and guidance on the process and factors that would be considered for authorization requests. These resources were created with expert guidance and input from members of our tripartite working group. It was very important for us to involve these groups as we wanted to advance the principle of user-centered design, essentially involve the people who will be using the resources during development to ensure that they are useful for them. I really encourage you to visit the publication page of the website to access them. For today, though, I'll just go over a few key points for each step. So the first step here you'll see is create job classes. So job classes are comprised of job positions that have similar duties and responsibilities. They require similar qualifications, are part of the same compensation plan, and are within the same range of salary rates. The second step of the process is to determine which job classes are predominantly female and which ones are predominantly male. To do this, employers or pay equity committees must do a 3-step analysis. And this includes a count of the current positions held by either female or male employees, a review of historical data about the gender of employees that held positions within a job class, and a consideration of whether the job class is one that is commonly associated with a gender-based occupational stereotype. After considering each of these points of analysis in a holistic manner, the employer or pay equity committee, they'll make a determination on whether the job class is either predominantly female, predominantly male, or gender neutral. Female and male job classes continue on with the process of developing the pay equity plan, whereas gender neutral job classes, they don't. This third step in our pay equity plan infographic here is to value the work done in each of the predominantly male and female job classes. Determining the value of work for each job class must be done using a method that does not discriminate on the basis of gender, and also that makes it possible to determine the relative value of the work performed in all the job classes. So this means you can only use one method for all the job classes being considered in a pay equity plan. The fourth step is to calculate the total compensation in dollars per hour for each of these job classes. Now, the Act defines compensation as any form of remuneration payable for work performed by an employee and includes salaries, commissions, vacation pay, severance pay, bonuses, payments in kind, employer contributions to pension funds or plans, long-term disability plans, and all forms of health insurance plans. And finally, any other advantage received directly or indirectly from the employer. Once this calculation is complete, the employer or pay equity committee must then compare the compensation of each predominantly female and male job class of comparable value. So the Act outlines there's two methods that can be used. There's either the equal average method or the equal line method. Any increases in compensation owed are identified and calculated through this step. Our next one is under posting the pay equity plan. We're on step 6 now. So all context of the pay equity plan are then prepared. A draft version is posted in the workplace for 60 days for employee comments. The employer or pay equity committee then consider these comments in preparation of the final pay equity plan. Once this is done, the final pay equity plan, as well as either a notice or a schedule of increases, must be posted in an accessible format in the workplace. All right, slide 20, please. So just to keep us on track, we're still talking about employer obligations here. So you probably noted quite a few as I was speaking on the last slide. So here's a few more. So we'll talk about, this slide in particular is talking about employer obligations regarding the pay equity committee. So what is really interesting about the Act is the creation of the pay equity plan. It's done in a tripartite manner. So you have employer representatives, you have employee representatives, and you also have union representatives. So these are the actions that employers are obligated to do in regards to pay equity committee. So employers must inform employees of the rights about the role of a pay equity committee and meet all posting obligations. Employers must support the work of the committee by providing suitable meeting space, the necessary equipment, and time away from work for participating members. They must provide direction that permits the employer representative to perform their work on the pay equity committee. And they must also provide the required information for the pay equity process and ensure its confidentiality. So there's a lot of information sharing here in the pay equity committee. Like you're going to have like the gender of positions, information about the gender of positions and that comprise a job class. You're going to have compensation information. All of this is shared. And then also the employer must help facilitate the selection of committee members. And here's how that works. A little bit more about the pay equity committee because it's quite interesting. It must be comprised of at least 3 members that meet the following requirements. So the Act has actually taken diversity and inclusion and embedded it in provisions about the membership of the committee. So at least 2/3 must represent the employees who are covered by the plan. At least 50% of all the members, they must be women. At least 1 member must be selected by the employer to represent it. Where there's unionized employees, at least 1 member must be selected by each of the bargaining agents. And where there are non-unionized employees, at least 1 member must be selected by non-unionized employees to represent them. Because really, when you think of that composition, you need everyone's voice at the table and you need everyone to do their part. And so we really promote this space as an opportunity to collaborate, build consensus, and to develop a plan to promote the human right of pay equity. Slide 21, please. Okay, so this table outlines the obligations of other workplace parties in the pay equity committee. So we've already talked about the employer obligations. For bargaining agents, you'll see here, they're responsible for providing direction to the committee members who are representing employees of a bargaining unit. They're also responsible for providing any information within their knowledge or control that the committee considers necessary for the establishment of the pay equity plan. And they're also responsible for keeping the information confidential. So this is a key responsibility. For employees, they have obligations to provide information within their knowledge or control that the committee considers necessary for the establishment of the pay equity plan. And again, pay equity committee members, they must keep the information confidential. Slide 22, please. In addition, thank you. Responsibilities for the 13 main steps of the pay equity process vary depending on whether the pay equity process is employer or pay equity committee led. So this slide provides you a table that identifies both the step of the pay equity process and who is responsible during a pay equity committee led process. So this will really kind of create that scoping for you, Adriana, to know and to understand who's responsible for what, when, and where. So just as an example, when a pay equity plan is developed by a committee, the Act outlines that posting is an employer's responsibility. And this is seen through the posting of the first notice, posting of draft and final pay equity plans, including the notice of increases.
Oh, hello.
Yes.
Amanda, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Unfortunately, we need to move on for the questions and answers. We will be sharing the slides and comments to the guest, but we need to move on now.
That's okay. Did you want me to go over employee rights, or we were just going to jump right into questions?
Right into questions.
Yes.
All right. Let's go then.
We will give them the paperwork, so don't worry, they'll have it.
Okay, perfect.
But I have five questions for you and Eric on the chat.
Thank you.
So the first one, I guess, Adriana, how can we ensure employers adhere to the Equity Pay Act is covered. Kathleen's question is, step 2, what is the benefit to knowing which job classes are predominantly female versus male versus neutral?
Okay, so that's great. Thank you for that question. So in order to do the pay equity process itself, you need to know which job classes are predominantly female and which job classes are predominantly male. And then what you're going to do is you have to compare those predominantly female job classes with those predominantly male job classes of equal value, and you compare them to ensure that the compensation that they're receiving is comparable.
Got it. It does, because we are, I guess we act different. Not all males and not all females are typical female males, or all the genders we have now, right? So we have to adjust for that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so if you go online, we have we've done interpretations around the terms female and male as they're used in the Pay Equity Act to expand the definition to include, to be gender inclusive, and to also meet the requirements under the Canadian Human Rights Act is in a workplace to be it's a human right, and individuals cannot be discriminated against based on their gender identity. So in determining whether or not whether a job class is either female or male predominant, we have provided policy guidance and interpretation on how to ensure that our non-binary community can be included in that employee count in a way that reflects their preference. So that's how we've expanded the definition to ensure inclusivity in that manner.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. The next question, I'm going to do Kathleen's again because she has another one. Why don't the neutral jobs continue through the pay equity plan?
Oh, that's because if the job class is neutral, it's held by both by equal numbers of male and female positions. And so when they constructed the pay equity process, the assumptions was that those neutral job classes would not be as subject to gender stereotypes, which would then influence the value that's attributed to that particular job class. Is that helpful?
I think so, yes. One of the other questions in here, another Kathleen, a different Kathleen, will the slides include the value calculation on step 3? Do you know?
The value of work?
I think the step 3 on the 5 steps, there was a value calculation. I don't know if that's the correct terminology.
Let me just check here. I just want to know which one you're referring to, because we have quite a few calculations.
There's a lot. So are there some calculations that will be included on the slides?
So I did not put the calculations in the slides. However, when you go to the end, the last PowerPoint slides, there's all the lines to our resources, and we have extensive resources about the calculation of compensation, also the comparison of compensation. And if you're referring to the value of work, the Act is only prescriptive to the effect that the method cannot discriminate on gender, and also the same method has to be used across, like, for all the same job classes. So that that value of work calculation, as long as it meets those criteria, pay equity committees or workplaces or employers, they're allowed to use a method that suits their workplace or their operations, if you will.
Perfect.
Yeah.
The last question I have, actually there's 2, but they're actually the same question. So Kelsey was asking, is there an equivalent to the Canada Pay Equity Act that applies to companies outside of federal companies? And the other one is, for me, would you say that labor unions with collective agreement are good examples of pay equity systems in the private industry?
So for Kelsey's question, I will invite you to look at that map that's in the PowerPoint slide, because it identifies the pay equity legislation or policy that applies to each of the provinces. And then for your question, Claudia, the pay equity process and the obligation to post a pay equity plan is outside of the collective bargaining process. So I can't really speak to that, right? I wouldn't be able to properly provide a response to that one, because they are very separate and in the private industry. So yeah, I would leave it at that for your question.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. I don't have any more questions on the chat. So I wanted to thank you, Eric and Amanda. Merci beaucoup pour la présentation.
It's our pleasure.
And thank you for sharing the slides with us as well. We're going to make sure that those get posted either on the chat or on the website. So stay here for just a second. We're going to thank some of our watch parties. So we have not just individual registrants to this conference, people that are coming with their own, they have their own account, their own computer, but we also have parties. Workplaces, Calgary, Saskatoon for Graham Construction and Engineering, Inc., HDR, San Francisco and Toronto, and EPCOR Edmonton. So Kim Alcorn is actually hosting this EPCOR watch party. So welcome to our watch party attendees. And don't worry, you have baskets too, even though you're not here on a specific window. And the winners for the next 2 baskets, baskets 3 and 4, courtesy from our sponsors. And the drum roll, Harpreet Kaur and Jack Edwins. So you are lucky people that get to have a basket. Whatever address you gave us, that's the one I will use to mail out those baskets. So congratulations, Harpreet, and congratulations, Jack. I'm jealous that you got the baskets. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
very
having
much.
us. It was a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your summit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.